Is the meeting of the Finance Subcommittee, December 2025, to review the upcoming City Council budget. So thank you all for attending. I'd just like to welcome members of the public who are in attendance, as well as members of the committee and officers who will be assisting us throughout today. The meeting is being webcast live, I believe. Thank you. So just please be aware of that. I would just like to outline the emergency evacuation procedure. We are not expecting a fire alarm today, so if one does go off, please leave the room calmly via the lobby area and congregate outside City Hall. If you turn right outside of the doors, could go down to by the cathedral and where the assembly point is. I'd like to quickly start by inviting members of the committee to introduce themselves, as well as the attending policy chair and officers, please. I'll start. My name is Councillor Patrick McAllister, Councillor for Hot Wars and Harbourside and Chair of the Finance Subcommittee. Councillor Hacker.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jonathan Hacker. I represent Stockwood Ward and I'm Vice Chair of the Finance Committee.
Councillor Shona Gentry, I represent Lawrence Hill.
Councillor Heather Mack, I represent Lockleys.
Councillor Andrew Brown, Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Ward, and also Chair of the Economy and Skills Committee, so here in two capacities today.
Councillor Rob Logan from Philwood. I'm a member of this committee and the Chair of the Audit Committee.
Councillor Tim Rippington from Brislington East.
Ian Hurd, Policy Committee Team.
Andy Rothery, Executive Director, Resources.
So, my name is Councillor Lorraine Francis. I am the Councillor for Eastville Ward and I am Chair of Adult Social Care.
Good afternoon, my name is Alex Hearn. I'm the Director of Economy of Place.
Not working, is it? Hello, I'm Medi Jacobson, Director for Adult Social Care.
Tom Wilson, Director of Adult Social Care Commissioning.
Thank you very much all. We'll refresh the introductions as more people arrive for later sections. Could I check if there's been any apologies for absence, please? No, thank you. I note we are missing a couple of members.
Councillor Renard sends his apologies.
Thank you, if that could be noted. And I believe Councillor Thomas is running a bit late as well. And I believe that accounts for everybody, unless my maths is very off. Thank you. The next item is declarations of interest. So I'd just like to ask committee members if you've got anything to declare in relation to today's business, including tomorrow's items for the second half of this meeting. I'd like to remind members that as we will be discussing the housing revenue account, this does include tenancy interests you may have. I'll declare I am a trustee of We the Curious, which has a long lease with the council, and that falls under the Economy and Skills Committee. Councillor Hugger.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a non-executive director of Bristol Waste, so when we discuss environment in sustainability, then there's a relevant interest there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mack.
I'm a non-executive director for Bristol Holdings, so related to Bristol Waste and Gorham Homes.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest today? No, thank you. All those are noted. Agenda item 4 is public forum. Excuse me. Apologies, Councillor Francis.
I always like to declare that I am a registered but not currently practicing social work because it's relevant to the role.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Francis. Agenda item 4 then is public forum. I'd like to remind members in the public that as today is a two-part meeting, we will be having public forum at the start of each session, so today and tomorrow. The public forum items have been organised to match with the budget areas which we will be considering in each respective half. Public questions and responses have been circulated to committee members and published on the Council's website in advance of this meeting alongside agenda papers. I'm not going to discuss time limits because I don't think those are going to be too relevant. But each questioner is permitted to ask up to 2 oral supplementary questions if they so wish. And we will also be having time for statements as well. If there are supplementary questions, it may be possible for us to provide a written response at a later date. Could I ask, please, if Linda Rook is here to ask her question, please? Thank you, Linda.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Linda Rook. I'm Bristol-based. I'm an actor and I'm president of Equity UK. So I represent 50,000 freelance self-employed workers in the performing arts. Thank you for your response to my question, and I've also looked at the other comments that were provided regarding the threatened cuts or potential cuts to performing arts in the city. My question is, I want to know what actually are the concrete proposals that we're hearing could be put in place to replace what that funding is. At the moment, nobody seems to know. It allows precarity in the industry. There's no long-term thinking for this. So can we have, as people who actually work in the industry, some information on what you as a council are proposing to replace that funding, which is what Tony Dyer said on the radio the other day to me?
Thank you very much for that supplementary question, Linda. We don't currently have Tony Dyer or representatives from the culture team here, unless Alex would like to say anything.
Thank you, Chair. So I understand that there's obviously a desire to have certainty on this. As was included in the open letter published, I think, on Friday, it is still being worked on, but we are looking at designing arrangements that can, on the one hand, attract funding from other sources, including potentially donations, and we appreciate that won't be on its own sufficient. We are also looking at whether there is a case for using some of the obligations that turn into financial obligations that we get through development and regeneration in the city, in the same way that we're able to fund other forms of infrastructure as well. So that work is ongoing. I appreciate it's not ready yet. Work is underway. The saving proposal was from last year. It was deferred, giving a year for that work to be undertaken. It's not yet complete, but I appreciate there's a desire to see that come forward in a more concrete way. We just can't provide it right now, but thank you.
Thank you. Could I have a second question? Is that possible?
Yes, you may have another supplementary question.
I want to know if the Arts Council England 2025 survey on private investment in culture has been included in your research when you're considering potential private investment. It's a very relative document which I'm afraid pours water on some of your ideas.
So I'm sure that would have been considered by the team working on it.
Could I have that confirmed, please, one way or the other?
I'm very happy to provide that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Linda, for your questions, and Alex for providing some answers there to the supplementaries. We don't have any more questions for this part of the meeting. We do have a series of statements, again, all regarding the strategy and resources budget area and the cultural investment programme. So please may I ask if we have Anne Farthing here? Dinka Hines, I apologise if I mispronounced that. Tara Sakdeva. Thank you, Tara. You may make your statement.
Yep, I'm Tara Sakdeva, the founding director of Compass Presents, which is an independent arts company, and I'm also a member of the One City Culture Board. So this is my statement. There's wide opposition to the proposed closure of the Culture Investment Programme on the grounds of false economy. Organisations funded by this programme generated a direct economic impact of 41.5 million. The investment leveraged 10.4 million from other funding sources. For every £1 invested, arts organisations can leverage £88 into the city. 10.9 million people experienced Bristol's culture in 2024, live and online. Culture generates 892.9 million in economic impact for the city every year. Culture creates 122.4 million in social value, improving health and well-being, education, community cohesion, employment and the environment. The city will be economically, socially and culturally poorer if the cut goes ahead, with increased exclusion for underserved communities. An open letter from the culture and creative sector opposing the culture investment programme cut has gained more than 1,000 signatures.
Thank you very much for your statement, Tara. Do we have Anna Rutherford to give a statement? No? And I don't believe we have Matthew Austin either. No. Well, thank you very much indeed to everyone who took part in public forum. Those statements and questions have been noted in the minutes. And thank you as well to Councillor Dudd, who I see up there, for the support you've provided in facilitating public forum questions. We will have more public forum at tomorrow's meeting for relating to the items on that agenda. We now turn to the main business of this meeting, which is agenda item 5, the report titled the 2026-27 Budget and Medium-Term Financial Planning Developing Budget. In a moment, I will ask Andy Rothery, the Council's Executive Director of Resources, to introduce the report. But firstly, and particularly for the benefit of members of the public, I will set out the context for this discussion and clarify the role of the Finance Subcommittee in this meeting. This report provides detail on the development of the 26-27 General Fund budget as outlined in the Medium-Term Financial Strategy published in October, revised to take account of the developing savings to manage the General Fund financial gap. The report is designed to enable this subcommittee to review key financial information, including developing budget, identified budget pressures and the emerging savings and capital proposals as part of the process of supporting the Strategy and Resources Committee in development of the Council's budget. As stated in the report, it is important for members to note at the outset that the provisional financial settlement from the UK Government is not yet available. This is expected in the week commencing 15th of December. The outcome of this subcommittee budget review will feature alongside this in order to further inform the proposed budget that will be published for the Strategy and Resources Committee on the 2nd of February 2026. The report before us today provides details on the scale of the General Fund budget challenges faced by the Council and the savings proposals that are being developed to manage the General Fund financial gap and the capital programme. The report also outlines the Housing Revenue Account financial challenge and the related developing savings proposals, as well as the developing budget around the dedicated schools grant. I would like to stress at this point the importance of balancing the Council's budget. Members have a fiduciary duty to set a legal and balanced budget for council tax setting, and it is an essential step in the financial management of the Council to ensure that we live within our means. For all councils under financial stress, there remains the risk of a Section 114 notice, which is where a council publicly reports that it cannot fund its expenditure from available income. It is imperative that we continue to take every step to ensure this is not a situation that Bristol City Council finds itself in. Since the summer, updates on the scale of the financial challenge and the consequent mitigating actions, together with updates on progress of the delivery of in-year savings, have been the subject of reports to each meeting of the Strategy and Resources Committee, with regular reporting also to individual policy committees on the financial position. This Finance Subcommittee is a standing and established subcommittee of the Strategy and Resources Committee. Since the summer and ongoing throughout the autumn, the subcommittees have held a series of private meetings where we have been briefed about the ongoing actions to mitigate the budget challenge, the development of the budget consultation which was recently carried out, and the development of emerging saving proposals. As indicated on the agenda and as per the detail included in the agenda papers, the Finance Subcommittee will review the budget and savings proposals across each policy committee's remit. Policy committee chairs and relevant senior officers are here to respond to members' questions. At today's session, we will be reviewing the developing budget proposals in relation to the adult social care, economy and skills, environment and sustainability, and strategy and resources portfolios. We will be aiming to break for about 10 minutes after the economy and skills portfolio. At the end of today's session, we will adjourn the meeting and reconvene at 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon to review the developing budget proposals in relation to public health and communities, homes and housing delivery, including the housing revenue account, transport and connectivity, and children and young people, including the dedicated schools grant. To clarify, the Finance Subcommittee's role over these sessions is to comment and make observations on proposals. We do not have decision-making powers in this body. Following our sessions, the comments we've made will be reported formally to the 2nd of February meeting of Strategy and Resources, and on that day the Strategy and Resources Committee will review budget consultation recommendations to be submitted to the full Council budget meeting on the 12th of February 2026, where the full Council must agree a balanced budget. As we work through the meeting, I think it would be helpful if we can identify areas of proposals where we feel there is a political consensus in terms of it being appropriate for savings in light of pressures and capital projects to be taken forward. I appreciate there will always be some political differences on this about certain proposals, and I would urge that we can be transparent about this, and we can of course reference that in the report we will be making to Strategy and Resources. I will comment, I think over the last several months we've had some excellent and collaborative cross-party work within the private meetings of the Finance Subcommittee, and it's my fervent hope that we can continue that today. I would urge members to please bear in mind and keep at the forefront of your considerations that currently all of the identified savings are required to assist in the ultimate delivery of a balanced budget. I would also like to ask that when members want to talk about a specific area, they can please identify the page number and specific savings item they're referring to make life easier for the officers who are facilitating today's meeting, and also so we can use our fancy new AV equipment to bring them all up on the screen for everyone to see more easily. Thank you very much. I would now like to invite Councillor Logan.
Just a question on the role of the committee, which you referred to. It's described in, I think, paragraph 1.4 of the report. I think the language is the language of last year, and I'm not sure if it reflects the update in the council constitution in terms of clarifying what you said out loud, which is that the role of this committee is to support the development of the budget and to make observations and comments to the Strategy and Resources Committee, but the committee isn't responsible for the development of the budget in the way that I think was unclear in the previous constitution.
Councillor Mack, do you want to comment on that?
Having sat on the committee model review group and discussed this back and forth and at length, I can confirm it is the language of last year. So actually there's an issue there that's not what is now in our constitution for the role of the Finance Subcommittee. I don't think. I can check the constitution, but it's not what I understood was agreed.
I apologise for that. Could we please make a note of that, Ian? Thank you. Thank you. We will make sure that that is reflected in the minutes of this meeting. I apologise for that error there. I have to say constitutional vagaries are not really my forte. Councillor Rippington, you had a hand up as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think in other places in the report it's been updated. I suspect it's just paragraph 1.4 that's missed the update in the language.
Thank you very much for flagging that. Then we'll make sure that that is updated and reflected in the minutes there. And then if there is nothing else, I will invite Andy Rothery to introduce the budget report. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So Councillor McAllister highlighted that there is a large national challenge in terms of local government funding. This report builds on our medium-term financial strategy that identified a 26-27 funding gap of 20.8 million, rising to 117.1 million over the 5-year medium-term plan before savings. This position does include assumptions on council tax increasing at 3% and the social care precept at 2% over the 3-year spending review period to align with government funding assumptions. This funding gap is after planned savings approved by Council in February this year of 23 million for the 26-27 budget and 32.4 million over the life of the plan. The recently published MHCLG policy statement and autumn budget announcements have provided the strategic direction on funding arrangements for local government. However, the funding allocations are extremely complex this year, and there have been significant changes through the fairer funding review. That means it has been very difficult to model and anticipate the provisional settlement to councils. We will get the detailed allocations of this funding. We're anticipating week commencing 15th of December, where we'll get the full detail and the allocations to Bristol City Council. Further work is underway to refine the numbers for the draft budget report to the Strategy and Resources Committee on the 2nd of February. The medium-term financial strategy has identified cost pressures of 28.3 million in 26-27 and 49.7 million over the life of the plan. These are detailed in Appendix 1 of the papers. The report has also identified new savings and income plans of 14.3 million in 26-27 and 27.5 million over the life of the plan. These are in Appendix 2 of the papers. We've made good progress on developing the Council's draft capital programme with new investment requirements identified of 42.6 million next year and 84.4 million over the life of the plan. These are detailed in Appendix 3I, and we have investor save schemes also in the appendices. Section 5 of the report gives detail on the dedicated schools grant and highlights the anticipated pressure on the high needs block. This is the element that funds special education needs and disabilities placements, and this is an anticipated cumulative deficit of 86.6 million by the end of this financial year. The government statutory override remains in place and will continue in place till the end of March 2028. This means that the Council does not have to identify and apply its own reserves, but we are holding this deficit in our accounts. The Education Capital Programme is in Table 6 of the report, showing 68.7 million over the life of the financial plan. Section 6 of the report highlights the headlines within the housing revenue account. The in-year performance is 1.3 million over budget. So to give a bit of context, that is below 1% of the total budget for the housing revenue account. The business plan is being developed for 26-27, and at this stage we've identified 7.4 million of pressures for 26-27 and 4.6 million of income and savings opportunities, and works underway refining the business plan. There's more details on the housing revenue account in Appendix 4 and 5. Chair, I think that covers the headlines of the papers. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy. Without further ado, we will move on to the policy committees, and the first one to discuss today is adult social care. Councillor Francis, would you like to introduce the budgetary issues for your committee?
Chair, sorry.
Apologies,
Can I ask a question on that,
yes,
on the paper before we move into the individual?
Yes, certainly. If you hadn't realised, this is my first time chairing a public meeting, so excuse me.
No worries. Two questions actually. Andy, the first one, as you've made quite clear, it's a bit of a guessing game at the moment in terms of the fair funding review and exactly how much we're going to get. If we were to get more than we had currently forecast out of that review, how would we decide to balance the budget? Would we look at specific savings that we think are less likely to be delivered and remove them, or do we have a priority list, if you like, of things that we would remove from the savings side?
Yes, it's a good question, Councillor Ripperton. I think the first thing we would do is, once we've understood the numbers, if we were in a position where the current pressures we're discussing today can be funded, we would need to also be informed by our period 8 position that's being finalised, so making sure that we've got robust estimates for demand on the Council's budgets. But if we have a good settlement that can cover our estimated new demand, we would have the opportunity to start looking at other parts of the budget. But that would be a judgment once we've finalised our latest assessment of our current financial position and compared that to what comes in the provisional settlement in December. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. If I just ask the second one, sorry, Jonathan. In table 3 on page 12, which is new funding to support pressures, the strategic SIL, it looks like a very peculiar set of forecasts. So we have 12.6 million for the next financial year, then nothing expected the year after, then 2.1, then 0.6, and then nothing. Could you explain how we've arrived at that forecast for strategic SIL, especially taking into account that we're now talking about the possible use of that to fund arts grants going forward, and obviously if we're talking about a sort of long-term funding solution, then you don't want something that disappears after 2 years to be included in that.
Absolutely, and the larger figure in 26-27 is because with SIL we have more certainty as receipts start coming in, so that this is application of receipts that we know about, and then it doesn't become as 100% clear in future years in terms of completion of developments where we'll get payments from developers. So it is work that's ongoing in terms of really reprofiling and understanding application of SIL receipts that are likely to come in future years. But that's why we have less certainty in future years. I don't know if Alex would like to come in on that as well, because the department sits.
Thanks, Andy. And just to add, I don't think that table is showing a sort of forecast of annual receipts of SIL. I think what it's showing is how, from a capital strategy perspective, how forecast receipts at the moment are being applied across some years. So obviously we'll continue to receive SIL anyway. I think that's a different. That would be in a different type of table. That's not just an annual forecast receipt.
Just to clarify, this is application of SIL to finance the capital's budget. We haven't, we would do further work on
so just clarify, anything on top of that would be surplus to what we have budgeted that we would require.
This is application of SIL as a contribution towards the new capital investment plans in the budget.
Thank you, officers. Right, we've got a few people's hands that went up. So, Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Andy, I'm looking at Table 1 on page 10, and it includes the new service pressures. It includes emerging, recurrent and new service pressures of 28.3 million, and we have an analysis of that in the papers. The corporate pressure is 15.4 million. I'm not sure if we have an analysis of that. I know it includes things like pay award inflation, levies, that type of thing, but I don't think I've actually seen a breakdown of that 15.4 million in the papers, so I'm not sure if there is one available.
We can make it available. I'll ask the team to provide a copy to committee members. We capture that as an action.
Thank you. The other point is that this table doesn't include the savings that have been identified. Obviously, those savings haven't been approved yet, and I'm guessing that the reason why the table doesn't include the savings is because they haven't yet been approved. And it also includes a transfer from reserves of 8.7 million, but it's not clear to me how that's calculated. I mean, there's obviously a rationale behind it, but I just haven't spotted that rationale.
Yeah. So when we say you're absolutely right, this is before new savings, so this is a refresh of the existing budget that was approved through the February Council, and then building up the new pressures, because we've got certainty on new pressures, and then we're discussing, obviously, emergent savings to help mitigate that. Within the 2-year budget, there was a planned use of reserves, but this is very much linked to the fairer funding review as well, where we anticipated a drop-off in our business rates retention pilot. It's now been communicated that that pilot is going to continue, but we still need the final provisional settlement to work out how much can be applied to our budget. But if we have a continuation of business rates at the same level, that should be beneficial. But the first, and it's back to Councillor Ripperton's points, the first call on that would be to not have to draw down reserves. And also, if we take the 28 million, when we look at the draft savings, there's a gap there as well. So that's where that is essential funding to keep funding us at a steady state without the need for further savings. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Andy. One more point, if you don't mind. I don't wish to...
Quickly, then.
Yeah, I don't wish to hog the stage. But the pressures include prior year savings that are undeliverable. So I think it would be helpful to have an analysis of those pressures in terms of prior year savings that are undeliverable and other items which are mandatory or discretionary.
Thank you. So we've got Councillor Thomas and then Councillor Jumfrey, and then we will move on to adult social care.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sort of following on from Tim's question around the fair funding settlement. Andy, where can we kind of see the assumptions that are being made about the level of government funding that are going into the kind of the budget that's there at the moment? And how does kind of what we're expecting as a kind of what last year was a kind of bit of a government magic bullet to help us bridge the gap? What was the size of that last year compared to what we're expecting this year? I realise there's quite a lot of moving parts, but it would be good to kind of see how some of those assumptions are kind of captured in these figures, and I can't really see it. It seems to be well beneath the bonnet.
Yeah, the best reference point at the moment is our medium-term financial strategy that went to the October Strategy and Resources Committee, because that does kind of explain the core funding assumptions. The next stage will really be when we get the provisional settlements. We can do that analysis in terms of what's moved against the financial strategy and the prior year's budget. So if everything at this stage would be estimating, we'll have more certainty once we get the provisional settlement.
Thank you. Councillor Jumfrey.
Yeah, sorry, mine was just following on from Tim's about the strategic sale. So just to clarify, at the minute we're not sort of assuming that there will be any that we can use in 27-28, for example, but there may well be, but we're just being sensibly cautious. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. These are sale receipts where we've got certainty, and that's why they're being applied as a funding source into the capital programme.
Thank you very much to members for those questions and to Andy for fielding the answers. We will now move on to the Adult Social Care Policy Committee portfolio. Councillor Francis, if you want to introduce your budget, and then we'll open up to members for questions, and of course officers feel free to contribute to this section as well.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to give you a sort of preamble that should summarise the aim of the budget. And I will be reading from notes because I do not contain the information in my head. In adult social care, our intention is to continue the successful transformation work that we have already underway to make sure that one, we can support people in ways that they prefer, as close to their homes, families and communities as possible when possible. We support people as early in their care journey as we can to help people remain in control of their situations to avoid crisis and unnecessary use of urgent emergency services. We continually aim to improve our systems, processes and practices to make them as efficient as they can be, and use every penny of Bristol's money as well as we can. For 2027, we are proposing 3.8 million of savings, which we will deliver through improving the ways that we work and the ways that we use our resources. We strongly believe that if we continually improve in the following ways, people will get better support and will continue to improve our financial position. Beg your pardon. So 1, we will improve our practices so that our assessments and reviews are more strength-based and preventative. This will involve rebooting our 3-tier social work model practice model, ensuring that we commission local social care and support services that are responsive to people and help them to maintain their strengths and confidence. As part of this, we are working with housing colleagues in the council and in the housing sector to develop more types of accommodation, such as specialised supported housing, which will enable people with high level and complex needs to live in their city where they want to be, or at least where they want to be and where their needs will be best met. 2, we will be reviewing our use of daycare and respite services to make sure that we directly provide what we purchase from the care market and it meets the needs of the population. We will also be working to make sure that we use those services in a fair and efficient way. 3, we will be working to ensure that adult social care in Bristol is fairly funded. Some examples of how we will do this are as follows. Continuing successful work to review the way we jointly fund health and care work with the NHS. Making the most of other funding sources that can support people to live independently, include, for example, housing benefit. Applying national charging policy for adult social care fairly to make sure people who are able to pay for their services contribute the right amount. The adult social care budget proposals also recognise areas of ongoing pressures, such as the cost of additional demographic demand as the Bristol population increases and presenting needs increases with it. Also, the pressures reflect the fact that each year children with higher level needs come into adulthood and draw upon adult social care. A second area of pressure is an undelivered saving related to specialised supported housing. This saving will be delivered in upcoming months, but inevitably delays in developing new build facilities have slowed the process. The proposals also suggest modest areas of potential growth, such as to increase support for unpaid carers and to develop more preventative approaches for the purposes outlined above. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Francis, for that introduction. I would like to ask if any of the officers have anything to add to that, but otherwise we will open up to the members for questions. I'm seeing shakes of the head, and Councillor Jemfrey's first out the gate, and then Councillor Logan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Francis, and I know this is an area you are an expert on, which is helpful. I just wondered if you could talk a bit more about the changes to potential daycare and respite care, because I know some residents have approached me concerned that this means that they won't be able to access day services or they won't be able to access respite services. So I don't know if you could explain in a bit more detail about what those changes might look like.
Okay, so I am going to hand over to Meta because this is one of her Sorry, Tim. Thomas, Tim, and Meta. Okay, Tom, as this is one of his specialist areas, so it's really important for you to get facts, not a summary from myself as chair. Thanks.
Okay, so these are two separate areas, but following a similar approach. And the first thing to reassure anyone that comes and talk to you, if we create substantial change to eligibility or service models, then we will go through both co-production and proper engagement. So there'll be consultation on any proposals that people, particularly people who are potentially affected directly, will be involved in. So hopefully that reassures a bit. So both of these are services that have been a long time since they were last reviewed. Day services, for example, were reviewed, I believe, 12 years ago. And a huge amount has changed since then, a huge amount in terms of the personalisation agenda, strength-based practice. So we believe that by reviewing the services, we'll find, well, we can deliver much broader range of creative day service opportunities or meaningful activity opportunities that are both more independence focused, less institutional feeling sometimes, and better for individuals. So that's that one. The respite, similarly, it's been some time since we reviewed it, and this isn't looking at all respite. We know that carers breaks are really important. There's a pressure for carers breaks, which is about ensuring that carers, as part of our carers strategy, have opportunities for more creative breaks and more of the things people want. However, we've
particularly focused on, so this is the long-term rolling respite, we call it. So adults mainly with a learning disability who have periodic respite. For a long time we've had block contracts which have not been fully utilised, and meanwhile we've got spot purchased services from other people who we're paying in addition to the block contracts. So we know there are opportunities to be get better value for money, and we're looking at those. We will also review the model to see if there are better ways of getting respite, better ways of targeting respite, ensure the right people are getting the right amount of respite. But again, any substantive changes, they will be consulted upon.
Thank you. Councillor Jemfrey again?
Just wanted to clarify. So obviously you need to do the reviews, but what you suspect and hope, just to clarify, is that there are ways to provide a similar level of support in a way that's both more cost effective for the council and more personalised for the individuals. Is that correct? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Logan and then Councillor Hugger.
So, thank you. The message on prevention, the three-tier model is really welcome. It's not massively new, but it's really important, and it's good to see that that's there. So I've got two questions, one on savings and care management and the other on specialist supported accommodation. So it's very striking that one of the biggest figures in the pressures this year is a 2 million pressure from savings not delivered, and there is on the savings side, there's a 2 million figure for savings from care management. So albeit over 2 years. The implication is we didn't do this last year, but we're going to do it next year. Is there anything that's going to be different in that sense? And the second question, Lorraine talked a lot about specialist supported housing in the presentation, which is really welcome, because that was one of the things that I thought was lacking in the narrative. There isn't a description of the impact of that we expect to have, and what I thought that was an omission. I was hoping that you were going to say, this has been really good and we want to do more of it, and we want to plan to do even more of it over more years when we identify more places, because that's really what's going to deliver savings in care management, is having more appropriate accommodation, and I'm not clear if that is happening.
Yes. Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Francis. So and Councillor Francis did include some of this in her summary. So the savings delivered through increasing specialised supported housing have been delayed, and that's what the under-delivery is, the 2.127. So that's not about care management, that's about having those services. We have now, in recent months, got to the point where we've now got, I believe it's either 8 or 9 schemes signed off, fully green light, going ahead. So over the coming year, the fastest of them will be completed, and then they'll be coming over sort of 12 to 24 months, and those will be purpose-built, really well designed, tailor-made for adults. Almost all of those are adults with the most complex needs, who are people who currently might end up in a placement distant. So we're bringing, people will be supported in the city. One of them's just in South Gloucestershire, Oldland Common. That's the first one, which is now filling up, or implementing the contract that's been procured. So that has taken longer. I think there was some optimism before. I mean, each of these schemes is a commitment of public funds for decades, and we needed to make sure we went through all of the appropriate processes to make sure that was absolutely right. So they are coming, they are all signed off, they're delivered, so they are definitely delivering, but later. And yes, we're going to do more. The framework manager, the specialised accommodation framework manager who oversees the pipeline, is currently working up what the ideal pipeline will look like. So this seems to be going in and out. What the ideal pipeline will look like over the coming 3 years. And when I say that, we've got something called the Supported Accommodation Delivery Plan, which was developed by our housing colleagues with our input. It's got hundreds of units. Now, we're not going to open hundreds of units, so I'm testing him with which cohorts, which people do we want to support, and how many at any one time do we want going through the pipeline. That's what he's working on at the moment. But absolutely, as a national conference 2 weeks ago, and Bristol are absolutely up there with probably one other council at the forefront of this, and it's something that's coming to all councils in the new year, so we're well ahead of the game.
Fantastic. That's really, really good. I think, Chair, maybe that doesn't come through in some of the reporting. It's not obvious that pressure is related to that. Yeah. So I think that just could be clearer. But I think also it's a really important part of the narrative that that's what you're doing, that's what's going to have that impact. Because as councillors, we want to know that that's happening, but we also want to know, are there barriers to it? So if there's a barrier around capital financing for new sites, for instance, is there something? Is that a case? And could we do something about it? So it's really important to know what is happening and what are the constraints on that focus. So thank you for that description.
And I think just to add very briefly that one of the things that I think we recognise, having been to conference, is that we don't sort of that balance between cheerleading ourselves and promoting what we do enough in adult social care, because we say business as usual, and we're getting on with it, and we don't actually think about, well, what are the positive things, because we want to remain really sort of balanced and not too kind of what's the word I'm looking for? You know what I mean. We just try and keep a balance, but maybe we underplay sometimes some of the positive work that our officers are doing. Okay, thanks. So the second part of your question, Meta's going to pick up.
Yes, so I think hopefully we've clarified that the two are not, or they are always connected, of course, but the savings are different, or not delivery of savings are different. So I guess I just wanted to comment on, you raised the kind of three-tier model that we've talked about in our other savings lines, and this is really important. It's important because it's about supporting people at the right time, in the right way, and it also means intervening early. So for those that are not familiar with the three-tier model, it means talking to people as early as possible in the hope of helping them to help themselves. So that's the first thing that we want to achieve. That's directly connected to how we've recently launched our new target operating model, which means we've put more resources at that first contact point so that we can resolve inquiries as quickly as possible and as successfully as possible to get people staying at home, being supported by resources that are available universally to people in communities. The second tier is around quick interventions that might help people get back on their feet, advice and guidance, sort of slightly added level of support to make sure that we are providing quick interventions that are going to help people to become independent as quickly as possible. And the third tier is when we have a good conversation with people about how to live well, but probably with adult social care. So these things are important in the way that we approach it, and of course they are connected also to specialist supported housing and how we use day services and how we use short breaks and support carers, because it's all about how we approach that three-tier conversation. I just thought might be helpful to explain that to people who are not familiar with the model.
Thank you very much indeed. I would just like to endorse Councillor Logan's points there. This is really excellent progress, and it's really good to see this programme taking shape and progressing. I think I know that there's cross-party support for more preventative services. It really improves people's lives as well as saving money in the long run. So I think we can all get behind this. It's a brilliant programme to see. Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Francis, for your report. I've got two questions. The first one is probably appropriate for Andy, I think. I see that out of the proposed savings of 3.8 million, 1.8 million might be subject to further consultation and the outcome of reviews. So I wondered if we actually have the time to conduct that in order to get it into the budget for 26-27. It seems to me that we might perhaps be you know, we might perhaps run out of time in order to get those into the budget?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hucker. So this can happen in budget setting where it's about the profile of the savings, because we, through full council, can approve savings going into the budget, but they will be subject to consultation before implementation. So in this instance, that may be the case for this one.
Thank you, Andy. So, and I forgot to say that was on page 26.
Yes, thank you. I will just remind members, sorry, I haven't been flagging this so much, but if you could say the page numbers, I appreciate Civica is unreliable, but it does make life a lot easier for the officers facilitating today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have one other question, and that's on the savings as well. Yeah, this is page 27. Review funding for joint NHS and council services. I wondered if we have any information as to how Bristol compares, because I noticed that a material amount has been put into the savings proposals for this. So I wondered if we had any information on how Bristol compares with other areas in terms of the split on joint funding between the local authority and the NHS.
It is getting better, but I will get Tom to explain. Or Meta.
Well.
They got to throw some.
Tom might well know the number, but I think the answer is we compare poorly. We have several projects underway already in this financial year, which are running very successfully, very specifically focusing on what we call continuing healthcare funding. So this is where somebody is entitled to have their care funded by the NHS under certain strict criteria. And we were faring quite poorly in Bristol. Less people were accessing continuing healthcare funding than we think should be the case, and we didn't compare well. So we've worked really hard to improve on that, and we're making very significant progress this year. We're also working on something called Section 117. So this is under the Mental Health Act. When somebody has been subject to inpatient care, they are then entitled to free aftercare. Again, the way that our funding arrangements jointly with the NHS were arranged historically were giving Bristol City Council, I think, what I would call a bit of a raw deal. So we have worked together with the Integrated Care Board on a project to undertake reviews for people who are funded through Section 117 and to renegotiate the way that we have share arrangements around the funding. And again, we're making very, very significant progress around that in the year. So this is actually one of our real success stories. We think that there is more work that we can do, however, which is why it's there for next year's budget too. There is a third mechanism, which is what we might loosely call shared funding. They're all shared funding one way or the other, but what we call shared funding is where somebody is not eligible for continuing healthcare funding. However, they may have an element of healthcare need, which we think it would be reasonable for the NHS to share in the funding of. And so between all of these different models, we think there's more that we can do on the first two, and I think we think there's a project that we can do together with our BNSSG partners, but also with the ICB around how we undertake shared funding where people have mixed needs. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. You're clearly looking at this in a lot of detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hugger. Councillor Rippington.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking again at the emerging pressures, page 20, and the unachievable prior year budget savings of listed as 2.127 million. You may have answered this already in terms of the supported housing, but in the recent Adult Social Care Policy Committee, the Q2 review there stated that the undelivered or red savings that were red were 8 million roughly. So is the difference between the 2 million that we're showing here as carried over and the 5.8 million that we're saying we're not going to deliver this year, is that the supported housing element which we're delivering but a year later, or is there another reason why those figures differ so much?
So the only saving that we've said will not be delivered, as in we cannot deliver it this year, is the SSH, and this is saying we will not deliver it next year, which is why it's going in as a pressure next year. All of the other savings relate to the purchasing budget, and so, for example, the amount of home care, we're buying more this year than we anticipated, residential care, supported accommodation. So those are the savings that have got red against them, because whilst we've made progress, we haven't made as much progress as we intended. Those savings we expect and are required to deliver and will deliver into next year. So they're not put in as pressures, because those are savings that we still are intending to achieve.
Okay, thanks. I've got another question, if that's all right.
If you don't mind, I'm seeing Councillor Mack indicating to just come in with some information.
Sorry, as always, I like to understand and crack these tables, because you've just referred to in year. The 5.8 million was in year. This is only referring to next year. The first column in this table is 26, 27.
Not delivered this year. Sorry, it's the last line of that table is
prior year budget.
Prior year savings not delivered.
I think it's savings that have been set in a prior year budget. Maybe. I'm now going to look at Andy. Because there's the pressure of this year. There's an amount of money that hasn't been saved in this year. Oh, now I'm making this more confusing and I haven't quite got it right. There's an amount that hasn't been saved this year. But then this figure looks like the amount that had been agreed in a previous budget that should have been saved next year, that you already know is not going to be saved next year.
Yeah, I think that's the correct summary. It's an adjustment to a previously agreed saving that's come through as a pressure.
Yeah, just to clarify, so there are undelivered savings in this year, some of which we're putting in as a pressure next year, but not all of which. So is that because we've just written off some of those savings that we won't deliver them full stop, or are they assumed to be saved next year and therefore they're not a pressure?
So there's identified pressures in this year, and some of them relate to savings delivery. So they've come in as a new pressure to adjust down to make sure we're resetting the budget aligned with current performance, but then there are further savings going into next year, and that's based on our current assessment of what's deliverable within adult social care.
Yeah, I must confess I'm still struggling to understand this. Mainly because unachievable prior year budget savings sounds like things that we planned to save this year and haven't been able to, which according to our current forecast is about 5 million. So I'm still trying to understand why 2 million of them appear next year and not 5 million.
If I'm understanding you correctly, Councillor, you're asking, are these inherently unachievable, or were they just unachievable in the past year? Councillor Mack again.
Sorry, I love resolving these tables, and at some point, once we've all been here for 20 years, we're going to understand it'll take us about that long to understand these tables, right? So it sounds like the 2.2 is 2.1 is a saving that was planned for next year that we already know is not, we already think is not going to be achievable next year. I think the question, therefore, is the 5.8 that Tim has highlighted. Where do we see that here? So it's in savings that are in this year that have we written off or think we're going to be unachievable in this year, but don't seem to be represented in this emergent because that only covers from next year. So is it that the base budget, I think that potentially the base budget for next year already takes into account has already had an adjustment based on savings that we know we're not delivering this year. So it's kind of not represented again, it is in the base.
Yeah, that's really the question. Has it been adjusted down by 5 million because we didn't save 5 million on a recurring basis? Or have we just wiped those out so that...
I think the best way to cover this is if I get our finance team to work with Tom and colleagues so they can pinpoint the exact savings that are making up the 2.127 pressure, and then you can see how that number's been arrived at. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, if we could take, I don't want to carry on this for another 2 hours, but if we could take that offline and get an explanation for the difference between 5 million that's not going to be saved this year and why we're showing 2 million as being carried forward, if you like. Or, perhaps we're completely misunderstanding it, but that is confusing from my point of view. Thanks. The other question was just going back to the savings that we discussed earlier. On the review of charging policy, it does state in the report charging is likely to affect poorer people, older people and disabled people the most. So my question would be, is this the right thing to be focusing on in terms of balancing the budget, if that's who is going to be most affected by that change? And I wonder what our message would be to disabled people, poorer people who are worried about this particular proposal.
I'm going to jump in first because it doesn't quite say that. It says to make the system more equitable and fair, people that can afford it will be looked at. Yeah, so if you are a self-funder, for example, you could well be, I'm not saying that this is the narrative, but you could well be a disabled person, for example, but a self-funder for one reason or another. However, it's about assessments. Whenever anybody that draws down on care has to be assessed. It's called a financial assessment. Yeah, so you have to be assessed. No one is saying that somebody is going to be left without the care that they need, and it will, if they can't afford it, then we will not give them care. It is not saying that. And it is not saying that we are going to take money from disabled people. That's that. I just want to make sure that that is absolutely clear. It is not saying that.
Well, sorry, Councillor. It says we propose to review how we charge.
Yeah.
To
so
adult social
we are
care
going to review
services.
how people are charged for the services. Tom will go into this because this is his area. He's probably. I can see his eyes in the back of my head because this is his area of expertise. But what I want to say is that we are not just saying we are going to take money from disabled people. It is part of an equalities impact assessment because you've got to identify where there could potentially be some concerns. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, just to say, my reading of that is that if we do this, the people who would be most impacted are in those categories. That's what it says.
But that's why we have equalities impact assessment, so that we can assess who might be the most vulnerable groups that might be affected. So we are being open and transparent about it, but it doesn't mean that we would therefore then leave people without the proper care that they need if it boiled down to the financial part of it, because everybody is entitled to care and everybody will receive care regardless. But we are not just going to say we are going to take money from the most vulnerable people in society, because that's not how it works. The equalities impact assessment needs to be done, and they need to be done accurately. So we are identifying vulnerable groups, but it doesn't mean that we are going to be simply saying we are going to severely impact on those groups. So I'm trying to keep this non-political because I could go into a different realm. So let's get Tom to answer the question.
Yeah, so the purpose of an equality impact assessment is to identify any potential impacts. That's why that wording's there. The amount that the council can charge is set nationally, and so the amount is set nationally, and the way it's applied is is locally defined. So which tools, which processes, how robust they are. So in the last couple of years, Bristol's been tightening up because in the past we hadn't charged fully effectively and consistently in line with what our policy said. So we're looking at that further. This is only a small saving compared to the amount that we do charge, and the areas we've already been looking across other local authorities at what they charge. The areas of variance are things like we don't always make a deferred payment agreement, which is a charge set against a property so that someone doesn't have to contribute to their care during their lives. In other local authorities, if there's a relevant property, that's always applied, and we haven't been doing that. So that's something we're looking at. Equally, the amount that we charge people for the discretionary support that we give them in relation to supporting them with adult social care is something that we're looking at. So this isn't, we're absolutely not targeting the most vulnerable to charge them. It's about saying, having tightened up our charging policy so that we're now much more in line with others, we think there's one or two small ways that we can further enhance that.
Ask another one? Sorry.
Yes, we've got a couple more questions, and I'm conscious that we are coming to the scheduled end of this item, though we did start a bit late. So if this could be a quick one, please.
Yeah, I'll try and be as quick as I can. On the two that Jonah asked about earlier, I understand from what you say that this is all about reviewing the best way of doing this. It's a bit unfortunate, I think, that the category that these come under is stop doing and reduce doing, that because that suggests that you are going to stop or reduce these things. And I think we all know that daycare services especially are really fundamental for people who are receiving adult social care for the reasons they are. So given that and this relates to Jonathan's point really, given that these are things that we're going to do a review of before we work it out, are we really convinced that we're going to make these savings in this year? Because I'm very conscious that every year we go through this and we end up not delivering a certain amount of our savings. So I'm just a bit concerned that we might be a bit optimistic that these reviews are definitely going to come out with the amounts of money that we have in the budget. Appreciate they're not huge amounts, but they all add up, don't they?
Thank you, Councillor. I think I will just emphasise the key takeaway from that. I think from Councillor Francis was that no one who needs it will lose care, and the only people who can afford it will be charged, and we need to do the review to find out how much money that might bring in. I also think you've raised a good point there, which is there's maybe a conflict between the internal technical labelling of saving categories of stop doing and start and so on, and public conceptions of what that might actually mean versus what it actually does represent. So thank you for raising that. We've got Councillor Brown and Councillor Thomas, and then I think I'm going to be minded to move on to the next item. Thank you. Did you raise your hand earlier? Okay, my mistake then. I can't quite see all of you behind Jonathan like that. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I think the first thing is just this thing about prior year budget savings. So I chatted with Tony about this on Friday. If you're trying to get 2 million of savings out of 25-26, then you're reducing you're reducing your cost base, your underlying cost base. So if you haven't reduced your underlying cost base in 25-26, when you get into 26-27, your cost base is running at a higher base than it would have been if you'd taken those costs out. So that's my understanding of how that 2 million of unrealised savings from 25-26 impacts 26-27. So you don't need to answer that now, Andy, but I mean, that does seem to be a kind of logical explanation. I think my feeling is that the kind of quality of work that's taking place in adult social care is 8.5 out of 10. You know, it's a kind of like, feels like a good focused team effort. In terms of being able to understand it from what we're being given, the the reporting quality, it feels like we're kind of slightly stumbling around in the dark, trying to understand what's going on. In the first place that I would pick up is Tim's point about the forecast savings versus actual savings. The biggest determinant of whether we're getting our costs managed and our revenue managed is, are we able to hit the budgets that we have set? So I would have hoped that we would be seeing performance, in a kind of overview like this, that we would be seeing performance against the budget that have been set for this year, because that's giving us an indication of how strong the team is at anticipating the pressures and then setting objectives and delivering against them. So it's an important part of a kind of a holistic approach to budget setting. So that would be the first thing I'll comment on. The second thing is where we've got these one-line items, I've lost sight of which is the table with the adult social care sort of...
The savings or the pressures?
The pressures.
The pressures on page 20.
Sorry, just putting it back. Can't see me. So what we've got is social care demographic pressures. I don't know what that means. Transitions, volume and complexity pressures. I don't know what that means. Prevention investment. I don't know what that means. This should be giving us at least a kind of clue about what is going on here and what we're talking about. I am confident that good work is taking place, but how on earth are people who are coming to this, able to understand what those things mean? Another 2 or 3 lines would be absolutely brilliant and would give us that flavour of what's actually being looked at. So I think those are quite easy changes to make in terms of getting the information that's presented being more accessible. So, overall, it feels like the team's cohesive, it's doing really well, focusing on the right things, but it would be great to get the kind of the way that the information is presented clearer to the kind of the general audience. And I think that might, there might be a bit of a common theme there across different directorates, but really helpful. And then I did have some questions just from last year of, there were big concerns about adults, children, high needs children going into adulthood, and that crossover point, really expensive potentially for us. Haven't heard anything, couldn't see anything about that there. So that's the transitions, is it? Okay. That's fine, we don't need to answer that then. And it sounds like the crossover between the NHS and adult social care is really being focused on, so that feels good. And then the 3-stage approach on residential care also is kind of focusing on the fundamental determinants of some of the costs there. So, sounds like good work, but just be clearer on the presentation so that the general audience can understand better.
And I mean that's fair enough, and it's 18 months work in progress, and we can take that feedback to ensure that how the budget is presented is done in such a way that it's clearer. And I think this comes up, this issue about how much information goes into a document, and it then ends up being you have this really humongous document. So do we just put a key somewhere in an appendix or something like that? Because otherwise you then end up with much more information per line than would be normal, I guess, as far as structurally, technically correct. But it's not to say that it can't.
I think it's just that thing, Lorraine, of having the general audience in mind rather than the kind of shorthand for people who know what's going on. So it's just somebody looking at it with that kind of perspective. And it won't take up much more space, but it's just, yeah.
But yeah, like I said, it could be like a key or appendices or something like that. But thanks for your comments. It's been really helpful to have the feedback, because I think that adult social care has done phenomenally well under this new administration, and there's been lots of positive improvements with all the pressures that the team is under. We've even won an award for our outreach work with vulnerable homeless people, etc. So, we are working really hard to deliver a budget with lots of uncertainties, because we still don't know what the Labour government is going to finally come through with, and they're going to do it very late. So there are lots of pressures as well, but yes, easily to address some of the sort of more technical issues to do with the report. I'd like to ask the officers if you want to make any final comments, because it's been really, I've been really proud to be part of this committee, and I wonder if you've got any final comments.
Well, I just wanted to, first of all, say that's really, really helpful feedback. You know, we're so immersed in it that that's really helpful in terms of helping us to make sure we communicate it well. I also wanted to confirm, yes, your understanding of the pressures line around transitions, that's exactly that. So that's tracking young people who we expect might need adult social care in future, and that's what the values in there are based on detailed information. I guess thank you, Lorraine, for that feedback. I think what we're trying really hard to do is to make sure that we have a really good narrative about how we want to support people in Bristol to live good lives, and to make sure that we use the resources that we have as well as we can for the greatest amount of impact that we can, making sure that it goes to the people who need us the most. That comes with making sure that we get the income that we need, that we support people away from adult social care where we think that their needs can be met in a different way, and making sure that our practice model and the way that we work with people supports that, what we call in a strengths-based way. That's where the savings need to come from, so that we're focusing on how we're practicing.
If you very briefly, just to say, yeah, thank you for your support and your questions. We've got an army of about 850 people delivering adult social care for the council, and they're working tirelessly every day. We put them under a lot of pressure. Their jobs create a lot of pressure. It feels like things are going in the right direction, but as you know, adult social care in 2025 is not an easy thing, and our workforce really are rising to the challenge.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that positive note to end, and I'm sure I speak for the whole committee when I ask you to pass on our thanks and gratitude for the work that all of your staff do. Thank you very much, Councillor Francis, and officers for attending today and answering our questions. If I can invite Councillor Brown to cross the floor and...
John, CMP to come forward.
Yes, I was just about to. And if the officers at the back row would like to come forwards as well, and once everyone's seated, we'll do a quick round of introductions before jumping in. Thank you. I think we all know each other here. We'll do some introductions for the webcast as well. Thank you very much. Now, I believe everyone's got the correct nameplates. I'd like to ask Councillor Brown to introduce his policy area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. So I'll go through the pressures and then the emerging savings proposals. So the pressures for Economy and Skills Committee are on page 22. So the first listed income pressure is in the emergency planning team, but this is actually to take out a misappropriated saving that's in the existing MTFS and reverse that out to rectify an error that's assumed. So that's that first pressure, which is the 20,000 in 26, 27, and then there's obviously some rounding up, but effectively 22,000 over the period of the MTFS. And then the undeliverable previous saving is more significant. This is the St Nick's Market fees and charges. The previous budget assumed that fees and charges would increase, and there's been a round of papers coming to Economy and Skills, which were approved initially to go out to consultation on a scheme that would increase the fees and charges within St Nick's Market, and that was baked into the medium-term financial plan from 26-27 onwards. These figures, I'm afraid, are out of date, because these are the figures that relate to savings that weren't going to be delivered in that had already been assumed to be in the MTFS, which weren't then going to be delivered in 26-27, but over time would have increased. So you can see how it shows that in 26-27 there was a pressure of 160,000, but then 50,000 per annum coming back in as fees were phased in. But that proposal was also voted down by or deferred by committee. So therefore, following the September policy committee, these figures are out of date, and the actual situation is that there was £204,000 pressure in 26-27, and then no change thereafter, because we've not assumed anything beyond CPI increases in rates. So that's just a technical, well, it's not just a technical, but that is a correction to those figures. Moving on to the proposed savings. If I can just find them. Thank you. So the savings, £200,000 next year in development management. This is due to an uplift in the fees that have been coming in as a result of increased, A, the increase in fees, and B, increase in applications. So that's £200,000 extra going into development management. So that's a positive. That money is being used to support the various internal consultees and recharges within the council as part of the overall planning process. And then the next line is to do with the Harbour Authority. So as you'll be aware, the Harbour has a ring-fenced account for all assets within the Harbour estate, but it will take some time to get to a financially sustainable position for the Harbour Authority. And what this line does is outlines the intention to get to that balanced position by the end of this medium-term financial strategy period, and reduce the support that comes out of the general fund each year for the Harbour Authority. So you'll see that it goes up technically in 26-27 by 45,000, and then over subsequent years the amount that the general fund is assumed to support the Harbour Authority goes down. Those figures are backed up by the Harbour Strategy, which was adopted by Economy and Skills, the last Economy and Skills Policy Committee meeting, and the Harbour Business Plan, which is coming to the Harbour Committee for approval in January. And there's been a lot of work done in terms of marketing the harbour as a place for commercial business. There's been an exercise in advertising our various sites for meanwhile uses, and we'll be looking through a commercial prospectus, and we'll be looking at those early next year in terms to drive up the revenue that the harbour estate generates to support its services. So moving on, we've got the capital projects, and the harbour again looms large in this. The harbour infrastructure is 200 odd years old and needs a lot of work to ensure that the water stays in the right place, which is inside the harbour, and that the city stays in the right place, which is outside the harbour. So So most of the those capital pressures and projects are related to harbour infrastructure and ensuring that ensuring that it's maintained and fit for the future going forward. There are a couple of other items in there. One is entitled Protecting Bristol's Fibre Network, and this is about ensuring that the service has a capital budget to draw on when it needs to repair fibre optic cables in our BNet network, which are often prey to rats and the like who like to chew through fibre optic cables. So this is about making sure the team have a budget for those capital repairs. There is also a line for investment in St Nick's Market, so allied with the issue of fees and charges, which we will be looking at and bringing forward further proposals on, is the need to ensure that there is investment in the infrastructure and in the market to ensure that it appeals, that it supports traders and visitors alike. So there's a capital budget for that, and I think everything else, I think that more or less covers that, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown, and I apologise to the officers. Having said I would, I didn't ask you to introduce yourselves before we start, so if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves before you first contribute, just for the webcast, that would be brilliant. Thank you. Did I see Councillor Rippington's hand there? And then Councillor Mack. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, just say it's a bit disappointing that we've got a paper here that's got inaccurate figures in it, especially as you said the decision was made in September, I think, did you say? So I'm just wondering whether we, how that's happened.
All of the figures presented are accurate in terms of what's been taken through the development of the budget and the finance subcommittee. So if numbers are moving, that'll be through our latest monitoring and reassessment. There may be changes that need to be incorporated on finalising the budget, but we've made sure the numbers are consistent. That's been put into the public pack. That's also been through the previous finance subcommittees.
Sorry, Andy, I found that hard to hear, to be honest.
Okay.
Is it other people finding it difficult? Yeah.
Sorry, I'll get a bit closer to the mic. So all of the numbers that we're discussing today, we've consciously kept them completely consistent with what's been through the previous finance subcommittee conversations. So if numbers are evolving, I think that's something that Councillor Brown might have touched on, that in terms of the, was it the market pressures number, if that's evolving, that will need to be updated as we work to finalising the budget. But for consistency, we've made sure that all of the numbers are consistent with the budget review groups we've done and the development of the budget. So they're all balanced back to the medium-term financial strategy position as well that's been published.
Okay, I'm not quite sure I get why we don't see the most up-to-date position that there is when we come to this meeting, but I'll leave that one because I don't quite get that.
I think there is that assurance that the actual budget will have all the most up-to-date figures, but we're working off the figures which have been put into the public domain so far today. I appreciate your point there, though. It is a good one. I think it is something we should bear in mind for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I was just going to ask, in terms of the Harbour Committee, and we've got a planned reduction from the general fund. Is that something that we will absolutely stick to? And then if there are pressures within the harbour budget going forward, they will have to be delivered within the harbour budget. Are we going to rigidly stick to the reduction from the general fund and transfer the responsibility for dealing with any pressures? Or is there likely to be flexibility around that as things come up?
I'll take a stab at that first, but I might look to Patsy and John for backup. I mean, the intention is for the harbour to be self-supporting by the end of this medium-term financial strategy period. There are a number of reasons why it is taking, it will take that period. So, the harbour accounts have been, they were only delineated over the past couple of years. So previous to that, it was entirely within managed entirely within the general fund. So there's been a bit of unwinding, and there are a number of legacy arrangements in place with some of our tenants, for example, where there'll be breakpoints or rent reviews or whatever that are due at various points over the next 5 years that cannot be absorbed into the harbour account as things stand. So it will take that period of time to unwind. So as a part of our obtaining a new harbour revision order, which is currently waiting on Parliament to rubber stamp that, we have committed to this 5-year window. The intention is to stick to what's been put forward, and that has been worked through in the business plan as well, which I referred to, which is coming to Harbour Committee for approval in January. So the first part of the answer is yes, but I guess there is a but in terms of there may have to be some flexibility over the period during which we are getting to that position of ongoing financial sustainability within the ring-fenced account.
Chair, if I may just come in just to support what Councillor said. There's been a lot of work on in Councillor Rippington to underpin the assumptions here, which I just like to pay tribute to Patsy and the team who've done that. And you've seen them all, Andrew, haven't you? So I think they're stretching, but robustly underpinned. So I'm reasonably confident in them. But Councillor Brown is right. Ultimately, the council, the general fund, will have to support the harbour if they weren't able to continue to function in a way. So we will have to keep reviewing them as we go along.
Sorry, just to come in, Patsy Mellor, Director of Management of Place. Just to say the last few years and the performance of the harbour does indicate that we have got we're in a good position. We've reduced our general fund subsidy since 2021 from 1.7 million to around 775 this year, 808 next year. So indications are really positive. We have been reducing year on year, so there's no reason to think that we won't continue to do so. As Councillor Brown says, there are, and John, there are a range of assumptions in there. Some of them are hard facts, some of the in the business plan, but we will have to review it every year because some commercial ideas will go better than expected and hopefully improve, and some may not go as well as expected, but hopefully it'll balance out over the term.
Thank you very much, Patsy and John, for that. Councillor Mack.
Yeah. Firstly, I just wanted to comment on rats eating cables, which seems to be a specifically modern problem. My dad's electric car had all the cables inside it, which is quite problematic. I wanted to ask a bit about St Nick's Market. I'm a big fan of St Nick's Market, as you know, or questioning it. What do you see as happening in the next steps around St Nick's Market, given where we are now?
So the team have been obviously beginning to look at options and discuss, discuss next steps with traders. There is obviously Christmas period, it's a busy trading period, so there's been a lot of work and actually investment in terms of the way they've managed Christmas this year. So there's a nice Christmas market outside and a Christmas tree and a Santa's grotto and all sorts, which is part of our support for the market and the traders. There's also funding going in from the Shared Prosperity Fund to improve the toilet facilities and putting in an accessible toilet. So there is ongoing work. We are working through, how we shape the future structure of fees and charges. and we'll be doing that in engagement with the traders in the new year. And there'll be we're hoping to do an update at the February Economy and Skills Policy Committee, and then subsequently to that a full paper to look at a revised way forward. But we will have to we will be doing it in partnership with the traders as far as possible, because it's clear that the previous proposal did not did not command the support of the committee, and there was some pushback from the traders' representatives as well. So we will be working through to get to a solution, but part of that is also demonstrating that we're investing in the market, and as I said, that we've identified that capital funding as well to show that, as well as looking to meet our income targets, or we are also looking to invest as well. So it's it's not either or.
Thank you, Councillor. And then I've got Councillor Logan for a question.
Yeah, I'd like to ask about planning. A very exciting topic in the city, and members on the audit committee are lucky enough to have a briefing on planning next week, which I know Jonathan and I are particularly looking forward to. So there's an assumption here for some increasing income, and I believe national government are giving councils more flexibility to review charges for planning and potentially charge their own fees, higher fees. So if this can make a greater contribution to the council's budget, it should do, and that's welcome. But on the other hand, fees that are too high would be a disincentive on investment and building houses. So what's the right figure? How do you judge what we should be charging for planning, and how are we doing that?
That's a very good question, Rob. I'm going to defer on this specific question to Alex, if that's all right.
I'll try. So obviously what you see in here today is not based on flexible charging. It's based on the nationally set statutory fees, which have been uprated nationally. And while, as one or two of you might have heard me say before, things are difficult out there at the moment in terms of development, particularly in cities, we continue to have lots of planning applications, high numbers of major schemes that attract the larger fees, and fee income this year is very positive and is forecasted to continue to be good. When we get to a more flexible approach, you're quite right, there's elasticity in terms of what's too high, what's too low. We did increase our pre-application fees in the last couple of years, which are not set nationally. We have discretion over those, and there was a little bit of verbal pushback from some of the development interests in the city, but they were still paid. We will have to do some benchmarking, obviously, and we'll take advice. I would say that an important question alongside it, and perhaps more important, is what service can we provide? Because actually, if the service is predictable and positive and enabling, it will be the fee will be paid. Planning fees are never the highest number or the greatest worry in any development appraisal, particularly of larger schemes. So we'd have to pitch it right, but it's about continuous improvement, and I think we've been showing that.
Yep. If I could just come in, Chair, as well, thank you. As is well known, the planning service had a challenging time, certainly a couple of years ago, and performance wasn't where it should have been. And there were various reasons for that, but certainly an earlier recruitment freeze and a restriction on the resourcing was a key challenge around that. So I just wanted to reassure you, councillors, really, I think we are very mindful of that in thinking about an additional saving in this area. Performance has improved considerably in the last 18 months, which we're really pleased about. Not complacent, but it is now, performing well above an average performance rate in the key areas. So we still have some way to go, and we still have to come out of the designation status, which in our minds is overdue, and our performance certainly merits that. But I think it's fair to say that, and we will work closely with our chair on this, but we will keep this under review and make sure that we're getting the resourcing of the team right as well. But I would just like to say our chief planner and the team have done a really good job in the last 18 months or so. Andrew, I'm going to say.
Yeah, and I'd like to echo those remarks. And yeah, we have brought our performance back in line with what is expected, and we are, waiting on the letter from the minister to say that we have been de-designated. But there's also, but that isn't to say that we can rest on our laurels, and there are a number of challenges, and not to preempt your own briefing on this that you've got next week, as you said. But the flip side of planning is the planning enforcement piece, and we need to do more on that as well. And when coming back to your initial point about flexible rates, yes, we need to make sure that they're pitched at a right level. But if we can use, if we get to a position where we're able to increase the levels of income, partly as a result of that flexibility, and then do more resourcing into enforcement as well, I'm sure councillors across the board and people in the city as a whole would welcome that.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not seeing any more questions. Oh, Councillor Thomas. I'm conscious we were a bit behind time, so if we could keep this fairly brief, and we'll be moving on soon.
Just trying to link it up with the budget on the year to date. What I can see under economy and skills is the kind of the October management accounts, and we've got economy of place, management of place. Where does St Nick's revenues fit in the management accounts?
There will be an economy of place.
Okay.
It's certainly part of Alex's service, so yes, it'll be within the economy of place directorate.
And the planning fees?
Likewise.
Okay, so it's just showing us 1.4 million in total, which seems quite low. But okay, thank you.
I never said it was a high spending department. We spent a lot of capital, as indicated in the capital projects and the infrastructure within the harbour particularly. But as a revenue spend, we're a relatively low spending department.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I have to say I'm grateful for the capital spending, because most of my ward is held up by harbour infrastructure. I'm not seeing any more questions, so I'm minded to move on to the next section. I know I said we'd have a break, but given that we're a bit behind, I'd suggest that we move on directly to environment and sustainability and have a short break after that before diving into strategy and resources, which I think will be a meaty one. So if we have our little musical chairs, and we'll get cracking with environment and sustainability. Let's stick with the original plan then. Apologies. It is 5:43. If we could all be back here by 5:50, we'll take that as our 7-minute comfort break. Thank you. I would like to suggest we move on to the environment and sustainability portfolio. Councillor Fodor, if you'd like to introduce your role and then just outline your budget area. I'm conscious we're a bit behind time, so apologies for that. I think it was always going to be a challenge to stick exactly to schedule. And then, yes, if the officers would like to just introduce their roles as well, if they haven't spoken yet, and then we'll dive into questions. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks very much, Chair. So, Councillor Martin Fodor, I chair the Environment and Sustainability Policy Committee. It deals with everything from our biggest contract, waste and recycling, decarbonising the council, all the climate and ecological strategic initiatives that we do, and a couple of other things. So we've got three sections to look at here. The service pressures, so if I could start with that first, we've got a number of service pressures that are built up to do with the first one is the Revive network. That's part of the EV charging network, and there's sort of maintenance and sort of cost issues to deal with keeping that network active. There are income pressures to do with the waste service. That's because basically the amount of operational work that our contractor Bristol Waste does varies from time to time, and we've had to build in some cost pressures there because of the amount of work they're doing to deliver things for us. I think including things like fly tipping and so on. A new burden is listed, which is to do with the anticipated government requirement to pay into the emissions trading scheme. That's for the incineration of refuse, which will cause carbon impacts, and we have to pay that, assuming that starts when expected. So there are quite significant costs that are facing us if we continue to burn waste. There's some staffing issues. The energy supply team and the Sustainable City and Climate Change team. Energy supply has faced a number of new pressures, new demands to do with half-hourly metering and making the system as smart and effective as possible. It deals with tens of thousands of bills for the council and meter readings that have to be corrected and monitored and so on. And we had a report a few months ago about those new burdens which lead to this pressure. The Sustainable City and Climate team is an incredibly high-performing team. It's had vast amount of success for bringing funding into the city, into climate and ecology and other projects over the years. I think only one ever failed bid, in fact, in terms of their success in getting euros and sterling into the city and an international profile that helps support our work. But it's been funded from reserves, and those reserves were due to run out. And what we're doing is regularising the position of actually funding the revenue costs of that team so that the work can continue to help us deliver things like Mission Net Zero, funded by UK Innovate. We've had Youth Environment Action grants. We've had almost £1 million for Nature Together action with communities in the city on nature and so on. So we're proposing the funding of that team rather than allowing it to close. And then finally, there are energy budget pressures, which is due to the natural fluctuations of market for energy, which power the council. And then the final line is the waste collection, which was a proposed saving not yet realised, and that's because we are yet to make the decision on the potential changes to waste management and contracts and waste and recycling. So that is being moved forward a couple of years. So shall I stop there for any questions?
If you like, Councillor, thank you. Do any of the officers have anything to add to the introduction, or shall we jump into questions from members? Thank you. Well, questions from members then. I haven't seen any hands so far. Councillor Hugger, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Martin, for your presentation. And I think that was very helpful in providing a bit more detail behind the numbers that we have in front of us. Perhaps I should know the answer to the question that I'm going to ask, as I'm a director of Bristol Waste. But on the savings, purchase of a site for reuse and recycling centre, which would result in savings as rent costs would no longer be required. Has a site been identified, and will an existing site be relocated to a new site? I confess I don't remember it being discussed at a Bristol Waste Board meeting. It might well have been, but perhaps you could just inform me on that, please.
Sure. That's actually the next bit I was going to come to, which is developing savings relating to the reuse and recycling centre. There is a search, very active search for new depot premises that will be large enough and up to date enough for the team. And if there's a relocation, the lease will not have to be paid because there will be the purchase of a new site. And that's the intention. So it's still work in progress. I think that's a simple answer. Don't know if there's anything we should add to that.
Yeah, so no site has been currently identified. We're continuing to work closely with the Temple Quarter team because I guess in view here is the main depot, i.e. Albert Road, as a transfer centre, which is in the red line of Temple Quarter, and then Days Road currently, which we lease from Network Rail. And that site is quite an important site for us because of operating the reuse centre and the recycling centre from there. So we're currently working through conversations with Network Rail about either purchase or long lease, as well at the same time working through modelling around Albert Road relocation, bearing in mind vehicle movements and demand. So yeah, ongoing conversations. We haven't identified a site at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, as it's a work in progress, that probably explains why it hasn't come to me yet. But thank you very much.
On that topic, it's worth noting the figures we see as the pressures here are only preliminary figures. We can't relocate Albert Road for £250,000. And it's worth acknowledging, I think, in my view at least, this is probably one of the largest and more intractable pressures that the city faces over the longer term. And I'm sure we'll all be hearing more about it in the years to come, but thank you for the work you're doing so far on it. Excuse me, I'm so sorry, Councillor Rippington and then Matt Thomas. I'm so sorry, I think I've completely lost who was meant to be next, but you go.
I can confirm that I'm not Councillor Mack.
Thank you.
I wanted to understand about how we present additional costs and additional income, because there's a reference here to the emissions trading position and the expected costs for that are new in terms of our current balance. But equally, what it doesn't show is the enhanced producer obligations. So which I think is kind of £9 million. So why is that not showing as an additional income? Is that because that's not an income to this part of the council, or is that hidden somewhere else?
So is it okay, Chair, if I come in? Yeah, the extended producer responsibility payment is an unring-fenced amount that comes in, and Andy has previously explained this. I think it was an S&R committee, Andy, wasn't it? It comes into the general fund. It is the requirement is to use it for recycling of repackaging, which I can confirm we do. We do have plans both in the current budget to invest further in Bristol Waste activities in those areas, and further in in future years as well. So it's likely that a reasonable percentage of the EPR payments will be spent on additional activity in terms of repackaging. However, it is perfectly capable of being used for existing spend as long as it's on recycling and repackaging. In fact, it's described in the official guidance we have as a cost recovery fund. So that a reasonable amount of it is used for that. But we do intend, there's various improvements in that area planned on the Chair, and the EPR payments will be very useful for that as well. But it's not shown separately in the budget here because it just goes into the general fund.
Councillor Mack?
Sorry, I just get obsessed with process because I've had many years being around the process. We just don't represent extra money coming in these documents, and we never really have, and it's an interesting question.
Seems a bit weird.
Yeah, maybe. But I guess that just goes into this lump of money expected in the same way as we make expectations that the council tax is going to go up every year. And so there's that baseline of that. I guess that's all represented in the MTFS, and then these are the decisions that we'd be making up beyond the MTFS that is already assumed.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think that's the process. What I think, and John, that's correct. What I think, the reason I'm asking for our assurance is we need to know that that is part of the assumption. So we need to know that the assumptions for the general fund include those assumptions for the enhanced producer income, as well as expected tax and grants, which I imagine, I assume it does, but it's difficult to us to assure that it does. I'm sure it is.
John Smith.
Sorry, could I just correct what I said before as well? I've been told I got what was the term? It's the processing of.
So it's the processing and treatment of packaging. So the total cost that Bristol Waste incurs to treat, to process, to sort of packaged packaging. That's what that money.
That's what the money must be used for, which it is. But I don't think that's specifically stated in the accounts currently. But I mean, it's something we could build in going forward, and it's certainly something you've confirmed before, Andy, isn't it?
Can I add something to that? Yeah. So this, because of our method of collection, which has been going on for a good many years now, decade or more, we collect curbside sorted materials. They are processed, they are baled, they are sent to market. I don't think any other core city is doing it in that way yet. So we have been ahead of the curve, but we were funding that as part of a substantial contract. In effect, we're now finally being given the money that pays for that, and we are processing, and 85% of it all is marketed to reprocessors in this country for the material. So we were ahead of the curve. But any new burdens, so when we have new obligations such as soft plastic recycling or whatever, new simplified recycling that's coming, we could spend some of it on specific changes.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think the way I see this is that within the black box of unring-fenced general fund, as it were, and I'm sure Andy will cringe at me using that term, but we've got 40-odd million for the Bristol Waste contract. We've got 9 million coming in for waste services and recycling. It's quite easy to say that 9 million contributed to the 40 million spend, which is perhaps an unscientific way of looking at it, but I think it does stack up with the legal obligations around it. But Andy might have more to say on the details.
No, just to add that is the opinion of MHCLG, who has given a briefing on this, that for councils we treat that money as unring-fenced and is funding that's contributing to waste recycling and the recycling of packaged waste.
The one qualification I just add to that is it's fair to say not all of the money that we spend with Bristol Waste would qualify. It's not all used on recycling or processing of packaged materials, but in excess of the amount of the EPR payment is.
Right, thank you. Councillor Gemfrey and then Councillor Hucker again, was it? Or no? Okay. Councillor Gemfrey and then Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, thank you. I was just looking at about the money for the recycling campaign on page 32. Sorry, the education campaign. I wondered if you could clarify a bit more about what that will look like, because I know it's something that residents regularly ask for because they get frustrated that their neighbours are putting the recycling in the wrong places.
Yeah. These proposals are being drawn up now, and there has been, I think, minimal promotion and education work done for the last few years, so it is a new proposed campaign, and it's designed to enhance sort of participation in recycling, partly because we plan to issue new containers, as it says, because there are unsatisfactory aspects around the plastic crates and litter that's caused, and we know people have very strongly said they don't like that. litter, and they would like to have it easier to recycle. So new sacks that can accommodate more but are still safe to lift, make it simpler to handle and load the recycling. We need to let people know what that will be. It's still being developed because the decision has not yet been made until next week. I hope that we'll suggest we make those changes to new containers, new materials that will have to be issued to every household. So there'll be a big campaign around that, and more food waste containers, because only about half of households currently do that. And we know there's a lot of food waste in the bins at the moment, which again would cause impact for that emissions trading scheme charge, because it would be wasted material. So it hasn't all been worked out, and we're waiting to get the decision next week, and then this provision is subject to that.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. I mean, I think the huge issue here, which we don't really scrutinise, is Bristol Waste, and I know that Councillor Hucker has kindly offered a kind of to sort of walk us through, you know, the business plan at some stage, which I think could be helpful. And apologies, I haven't taken that up yet, Jonathan. Going back to the kind of the performance this year, it looks like you had an initial budget of 47 million, and the forecast budget now is kind of like 51 million, so a sort of a 7% kind of excess over what was originally forecast. A big part of that is under the heading property assets and infrastructure, where you had a budget set of 46 million and an outturn of 50 million. Is that primarily higher Bristol waste costs than was anticipated? What's that sort of excess spending that I'm on the report, the financial report to the October strategy and resources, which is the kind of budget excess spending for the year.
So just to be clear, that is seen by Strategy and Resources, which owns the company and receives the business plans and so on. So I wouldn't have had all those details for this committee, for my committee to deliver the service. What we do is monitor the service outcome, but certainly there have been costs, and some of those costs, incidentally, are for the final disposal of waste. They're not the operation of Bristol Waste, but they carry out for us the disposal of what comes as refuse. I'll see if there's some more information we can give, because it's not part of this proposed budget, obviously.
Thank you. Sorry, I have been asked to just remind those present if they could make sure their mouths are close to the microphones when speaking, please, as otherwise it can be a bit hard to keep track on the webcast. Thank you. John Smith, quickly, and then we'll move on to Councillor Rippington, and then we'll try and move on to strategy and resources, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we'll update you separately on that, Councillor. It's the 4 million to do with the PAI is predominantly not Bristol Waste. It's other pressures in other parts of the PAI division. Bristol Waste it was budgeted to make a small loss this year. I want to say 400,000, but we'll confirm something of that order, and it's on track to it's on budget.
Sorry, what's PAI?
Property assets and infrastructure.
Okay.
It includes the whole of the property estate and energy and a number of other areas. So it's not predominantly Bristol Waste, that 4 million figure.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that's fine. I'll pick it up outside the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rippington, and then we will move on, I think.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come back to the EPR, because 8.9 million, which is what we got this year, is a significant amount of money, and assuming that we get something similar going forwards, I think we'd really want to see a benefit from that long term, in case it's something that isn't around forever. So a bit of a worry that we're sort of plugging holes with it, but the other thing is whether we're using it in a way that it kind of invests to save. That would seem like, to me, an obvious way to use that money to make our systems better going forward, so that we see a real benefit from that, contribution. So is there a kind of, are we using some of that? Is there a plan to use that for infrastructure kind of things to make them more efficient and that kind of thing?
I could say a couple of things first. The anticipated payment in the next year would be significantly smaller, I think between 1 and 2 million, not 8.9 million. But we have in fact had a considerable improvement in our infrastructure in the last year with the opening of the Avonmouth recycling processing line, which allowed an immense amount of resilience with the service when Albert Road was entirely closed for a week, to actually refurbish the equipment that hadn't been refurbished for many years, and the materials were switched to Avonmouth. So we now have 2 sites that can process our recyclate, and that's really improved it and allowed some income as well for handling materials from an adjacent authority. But the expected sum is much, much smaller in the coming year, not the figure that we got into the general fund this year.
Yes.
So just a couple of things to clarify. I think the sum for next year, Chair, is expected to be at a similar level. I think it's thereafter it might reduce. Yeah. But the one for next year is, I think, at the similar or slightly increased level. In terms of I think there's a couple of things to clarify, because this has been questioned a number of times. The first thing is whether it should be ring fence or not. I think we've confirmed that. It's general fund, it shouldn't be. The second one, I think there was an assumption to qualify the spend, all had to be on new things and not what you were doing in an existing basis. As Councillor Fodor has explained, that isn't the case, and we use it on a number of additional things. However, it's also true, as I hinted at, that there are lots of proposals for additional spend in terms of the processing of repackaging. There are a number of proposals that would increase the spend in this area at the next Environmental Sustainability Committee. I wouldn't assume that they'd be passed, but there are lots of proposals there that would increase the spending in this area.
Thank you very much indeed to the officers and to Councillor Fodor for taking us through the Environment and Sustainability portfolio. I'd like to invite Councillor Dyer to come to the front, and I apologise that we are running nearly 25 minutes behind your time on this. We've had some quite active discussions so far, as you've witnessed.
Okay, thanks very much. Be happy to have talked in lots more depth about some of what we do, but happy to hand over now. Thank you.
So, Councillor Dyer, whenever you're ready, feel free to begin your introduction, and then we'll launch into questions.
Thank you very much. I'll do a very brief introduction. Essentially, Strategy and Resources Committee has budget responsibility for a large part of the Council. It's people in the support and enabling services, property assets and technology, and most importantly, the money. These areas are the glue that help the Council run smoothly and stay solvent. I also like to apologise for my voice. I am still recovering from a cold, which I just can't seem to shake at the moment, one of the problems of having grandchildren. For the 26-27 budget, the additional growth requirement within Strategy and Resources has been identified as 7.6 million. This will right-size our budget, particularly where there has been identified pressures and sustained investment into areas where national funding has reduced. Headlines include we'll continue with ongoing funding into the Local Crisis Prevention Fund to mitigate where our assistance funding levels have dropped, resetting our commercial estates income levels to align with current annual rent, and ensuring we have appropriate funding levels in areas of corporate support, including the health and safety, complaints and disclosures team, to ensure we have the capacity to meet our statutory requirements. To contribute to these additional costs, for 26-27, additional savings have been identified, totaling just over 8 million. The main one of these is adjusting our employers' contribution to the pension fund. We have benefited from a positive 2025 valuation, That put the Bristol Pension Agreement in a stronger position, and that has allowed us to reduce our annual contribution by roughly 7 million. We have also had additional demand for our annual leave top-up scheme where employees purchase additional days of holiday, creating a saving for the council, and we are implementing efficiency in the way we work in our support areas, making better use of technology. We're also investing in the council to ensure our property assets are fit for purpose, and also our digital infrastructure with key capital investment. And you will see some of that digital infrastructure because everybody can now see us in glorious HD, I understand, on YouTube. Whether that's a benefit or not is another matter. So we're putting together, we are investing roughly £2.5 million for each financial year into our property maintenance programme. And that would total 12.1 million over the 5-year life of the programme. That includes essential health and safety work that needs to be done. And also the IT investment means that we can replace some of the aging end-of-life IT assets in our key business systems, and that's another 8.6 million over the life of the plan. What I'll quickly say as well is there are strategy and resources you can divide up into 3 areas, which is service, delivery, corporate and capital. And then within that, within our service areas, the areas that probably people will be most interested in is property and culture. But I would assume Councillor Ucker will want to ask about how the pension fund contribution is working, and I may directly hand that over to Andy Wothery to answer that. And I think I'll stop there so we can get into the questions.
Thank you, Councillor, for that introduction. I do have some cough sweets and throat lozenges, if those would be helpful. Wonderful, thank you. May I ask the members if they've got any questions? Flurry of hands, Councillor Hucker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Tony, for your presentation. Yes, you sort of preempted my first question, which was about the pension scheme. The paper indicates that this could, a reduction in the contributions could generate a very substantial saving. So I wonder if Andy could give us some comfort on whether the proposed reduction in contributions is realistic and prudent and would be a sensible thing to do.
I think they are prudent and realistic throughout the process of developing the budget. I've liaised with colleagues in the Avon Pension Fund, so they are in discussion through the consultation they do when the valuation is underway, and then reaching towards the final valuation. And to explain them in a sort of a summary level, historically the Avon Pension Funds had more liabilities than it has assets, that has investments. So when you take one from the other, the fund hasn't been at 100% fully funded. So what we've had to do as a council, because it's been down at a lower level, is make an additional contribution towards that deficit to help the fund's liabilities get funded by the assets they hold. The fund's now gone for its valuation and it is showing that it's fully funded. So that means we can drop down our overpayments towards those liabilities. So that creates a significant financial benefit to the council. And the fund is confident that they will stay, under the cycle of the next 3 years, because there'll be another valuation in 3 years' time, that they should be in a stable position to meet all of their liabilities in terms of pension payments going out to individuals.
Thank you very much. That's very, very good news, I must say. I think I'll probably limit my questions in comments because otherwise we'll be here all night. So I'll just. I thought that might find favour. So. So I think I'll just ask one question and make one comment. Of the total savings, the vast majority relates to pension, and also there's expectation of an increase in the dividends that the council will receive. I'm assuming that is largely the Bristol Port Company. I'm aware that they increased their dividend this year compared to last year quite substantially, and it has been on an increasing trend. But I wondered if there were, because if that does all relate to the Bristol Port Company, then there's obviously some risk attached to it, because you know, it's not spread across a number of investments. But I wondered, Andy, if maybe you could shed some light on that.
Do you want to jump in, Andy? I think they are spread across multiple investments, and I have more confidence in Port of Bristol possibly than you do, which is a bit worrying, particularly given they are about to make a massive investment in creating a new floating wharf to build wind turbines for the Celtic Sea, or Celtic Sea, depending on which way you want to pronounce it. That is going to be some very spectacular constructions. To give you an idea, they are 3 times the height of the tower that holds Big Ben. So it's really impressive infrastructure. But Andy, do you want to go in?
I've not got anything more to add. We're comfortable with the estimate we've made on the dividend payments. I think what I'll also say is that, you know, I want to shout out to our Treasury management team. You had a report to full council yesterday, which I think gives a very positive story about the work they're doing, and particularly given what, so we say, has been trying circumstances in the last few years. They've managed to manage our investments very, very well.
Thank you very much. You know, I certainly agree in terms of Treasury investments. Those are managed very well. And I must say that I do think that the Bristol Port Company is a fantastic success story. They've been on a very good run over the last few years, and I hope that continues. The other thing which I would like to mention, as I won't go into everything that I've made a note of, because otherwise we'll be here all night, and I know that
feel free to email me afterwards.
Want to go. But the other thing that I wanted to mention is really something which isn't in the paper, and I'm sure that I'm in a minority of one on this. But last year we considered possible reform of the council tax reduction scheme. And that indicated that a 20% reduction would generate 3.4 million. And I think it's something that we will need to come back to at some point in time. I would have liked to have seen it considered for next year. But I do believe that it's something that we will need to accept at some point in time.
So what I think my response to that, Jonathan, is that
Councillor Hucker, Councillor Dyer is responding to you.
I think my response to that, Councillor Hucker, is that obviously as a council we have a fiduciary duty to ensure that we spend our money carefully and we make the most of the opportunities to raise funds, and we are doing that. We are, for instance, looking at a level of debt recovery of £10 million, which will help us going forward. However, as a public sector body, we also have a responsibility to make sure that we do not inflict further harm on residents within our city who have, over the last decade or so, experienced cost of living crisis and severe impacts on their economic position. So we have to get that balance right between getting the funding that we need to run the council, but also looking after our citizens, particularly those who are living under very deprived conditions.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. I do accept that it's a balancing act. Thank you for your response.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gemfrey.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate there's probably a really good reason for this, but I couldn't see any mention of the cultural investment programme in these papers, which is the thing that we've had probably most presentations at public forum about. So what would be the reason for that?
The reason there's no mention of this in the paper is there's not been a change in the profile. So what we bring to the Finance Subcommittee is changes in spending decisions or proposals. However, as you know, the team is anticipating the saving being delivered and is working on a plan. What we are also very much aware of is we've had a number of representations from members of the public and from cultural organisations. Later, I will say later, I mean next week, we have strategy and resources in which we'll have a presentation about the development of the culture strategy. Also alongside that, we'll be looking at £1 million of investment that's going to be made in one of our culture institutions, the M-Shed. As no decisions have been made on this as yet, as you're aware, as Finance Subcommittee, we are working through the numbers and we are also responding to the representations that we've received from members of the public, and we will continue to do that and look at finding a way forward that continues to provide the best possible outcome for our cultural services, recognising its impact, but also recognising, as I said to Councillor Archer, our responsibility to also be fiduciarily responsible as well.
Sorry, so just to reassure members of the public who may be concerned, obviously the consultation covered it and the responses from the consultation are currently being looked at and are being taken into consideration, obviously, for the final budget that comes to strategy and resources early next year.
We are continuing to take a very detailed look at how we create a cultural strategy and a cultural sector in the city going forward that, as much as possible, can be removed from the threat of changes in local politics, because we want to make sure that the cultural sector is able to continue to thrive in the way it's been thriving in the past. I think one example of that, may have been a reference to to the Arts England basically moving funding elsewhere. The reason for that is because of a political decision to invest arts funding in areas where they feel there is not as much cultural offering as there is in Bristol. So in many ways, we're almost being penalised in terms of funding for our success.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Logan.
Absolutely agree with Shona here. It feels wrong that there isn't a description of the cultural impact investment in the budget. I understand your rights in what you say. The reason it's not here is because it isn't changed from last year, but it's probably the biggest issue in the city in terms of the budget at the moment. And I don't think the committee could realistically recommend that the budget in its current format goes forward without that being addressed. So I think what we'd want to hear is that it will be addressed before the final budget is proposed. I think that's what you're saying, but we're not sure kind of when to expect that.
There would be a recommendation of what the budget would be that would come to strategy and resources on the 2nd of February. By that date, I expect us to be able to present a plan about how we're going to move forward with the culture sector, and I'm hoping that that would be a very positive plan that everybody can support.
Okay. Well, we wait to hear that. That's really good. So I've got one other question on culture and one about admin. So the culture one is about the museums, which is one of the biggest issues last year, and the proposals here are positive, I think, but I don't really understand them, which is that last year there was a commitment to reduce the funding to the museums that meant the museums would be closed, or some days of the week they'd be closed. And that was put forward, and the wording here is that a plan has been agreed to stop that happening. And I think at the last council you committed that there wasn't going to be a reduction in opening hours. So what is the magic plan?
I don't think it's a magic plan. It's more by deferring the decision for a year, it gave us the time to look more closely, and also in terms of having more effective processes in place that we've been able to establish, we were therefore to change our operational model without affecting the public opening hours. You will be aware that at the moment, the three museums that we're referring to, Red Lodge, Blaise Castle Museum and the Georgian House, are actually closed because they are normally closed 1/3 of the year, so they're normally closed for 4 months. What it's allowed us to do is to look and do some work in the Red Lodge in particular, but also in others, about ways we can reduce our operational costs without reducing the operational hours. Alex may want to go into more detail, but what I can say is they are also looking at a combination of commercial events that we can host, which was one of the proposals that came, I think, from the Finance Subcommittee from last time. There's also, we may have some hires charged for public events, improved retail offer, and some of that won't affect the opening hours because we'll be able to do that during times when the museums are not yet open. Alex, I don't know if you want to jump in with a few more. And then the other thing you might also want to talk about is which is as a separate item in here, which is the group travel, which is also open to raise some funds as well, because I'm sure you would have linked that to that as well.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Chair. So, just in relation to the historic houses, I suppose a key move is that it's instead of a 1 year achievement of I think it was 142,000 last time round, this is spread over 3 years. Tony's right that we're able to reorganise our resources in a way which is a bit more efficient across the museum estate, and then there's some additional commercial activity we're able to account for as well. Some of that is we're able to do because we've been successful in receiving Museum Renewal Fund this year, which allows some of that to be used over a number of years, so we're able to make some investment there. And the group travel offer is related because obviously it ought to drive more footfall to our museums, which then results in more secondary spend through food or gift shop expenditure as well. So that's something that other museums or other councils that own museums do. We haven't got there until now. That's something that is a tried and tested model that just drives footfall by effectively selling the idea of visiting a series of attractions in one place to tour operators.
Just one more thing I'll just add, which is one of the things if you've had an opportunity to read the report about the funding for the M-Shed, that's based on some feedback. What we're spending that money is based on some feedback from visitors to the museum. But one of the things that is worth recognising is we have still not recovered visitor levels in terms of numbers to any of our museums compared to what they were like pre-COVID. And I think some of the work we're doing is looking at why is that the case, how we can encourage more people to go. Some of that is to do with, if you look at the investment in MSED, is actually making sure the toilets aren't smelly. But also things like repairing some of the interactive displays to make sure they're working properly. Ironically, the spend has actually gone up, partly because of inflation, but also because people are spending more per visit on average compared to what they were doing pre-COVID, and that's something else we want to investigate to give more opportunities for people to, particularly visitors from overseas. If you go to most other countries, if you want to go to a museum, you have to pay a fee. In the UK, we tend not to do that. So we need to look at other ways of giving people the opportunity to give us their money.
That's really positive. It's good to know that the museums will be there and that they'll be available, but it wasn't really easy to tell that from the description. So that's helpful. So my last question is about admin support, I don't know if it's for you or maybe for Andy, because there's quite striking that in the pressures section for resources, there are a few lines that are about support. So it's 119,000 for support to policy chairs, 65,000 to executive office, and then there's a line 195,000 which is executive director and support to the executive director. Now that isn't admin, that's an executive director, although presumably it's additional support around that. Pressures are normally unexpected things, or things that we have been forced to do because something's happened, whereas these seem to be decisions. So we've decided to provide more support. Why did we decide to do that, and how much choice is there in relation to that?
Okay, thanks, Rob. I'm going to give quite a long answer to that because I think it's important for people to understand where we're going on this and why we're doing things. I would say that in other parts of the budget, and I think it's been mentioned a couple of times, we do things that are invest to save. In many ways, some of the pressures that you're referring to are also a form of invest to save. And if I give you an example of that, we recently created a new directorate, which actually was a recommendation from the previous administration. That was a directorate for housing. And the reason for setting up that directorate and creating a new executive director to look after that was because of our poor performance looking after our housing stock. So what we had identified, we basically failed to look after our housing stock to the standards required by the regulator of social housing. As a result, the regulator of social housing gave us a C3 measurement, and then we responded by creating the directorate and the executive director to improve our performance on housing and landlord services. What we're doing with the executive director resources position is, rather than waiting for somebody else to come in and say we're not performing as well as we could be, we're identifying that there is a need for an oversight position in resources to ensure that some of the areas where we are and have historically failed to deliver, for example, we have repeatedly failed as a council to deliver on our savings. We've only tended to get 60-65% of savings delivered. We've had problems with responding to requests for FOIs and SARs and complaints. And we've also had problems in ensuring our IT is suitable for use. So what I see this is as an investment in that we are investing in providing an executive director with resources to oversee that area in a greater level of detail than had previously been done, where it was effectively left as being almost something that the chief executive had to try and do whilst doing everything else that the chief executive needs to do. I should point out we have not created a new directorate in this case. The resources directorate has been there and has been there for 8 years or so. It's just that nobody had appointed an executive director to look after it. I'll give you one other example where we've expect to make savings, and my apologies to the current executive director of resources, because I may not have put this down on his list of actual targets to deliver. One of the things we are seeking to reduce is the amount of agency fees that we spend. We spend somewhere in the region of, well, above 20 million, I think, on agency fees across the council. Over 8 million of that is in the resources directorate alone. If we can reduce that by 10%, that'd be at £800,000 a year saving, and I think that more than covers the extra costs. In terms of some of the other areas, that is ensuring that we provide support, not just to policy chairs, it actually comes down to policy committees as well, to ensure that we are able to make sure all of you who sit on policy committees are able to access information so that you can make good decisions or contribute to making good decisions. But of course, we fully expect all of us to still argue about what right decisions should be in the end. I hope that helps a little bit. I don't know if Andy, if you wanted to come in or...
Thank you, Councillor. I would just like to build on one of the points you said there about the executive director role. I know this has been a feature of some of the publicity we've seen, and not to get political, yesterday's full council, where I appreciate you were absent, but your group leader specifically brought up the executive, the director of finance role as being brought in as an indication that the administration wasn't keeping a grip on the finances. I think that was the cart before the horse. That's a measure we're investigating to help ensure we have a surer grip on the finances. I think it will provide us with greater assurance of delivering our balanced budgets in the future. I think it's a really important step for the council to be taking at this time. So I hope that the city can take that assurance moving forwards. Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, just picking up again on this sense of kind of needing to look backwards as well as we look forwards at pretty much the same time, so that we are learning from experience when we're setting the budget, and particularly whether we're hitting the budget that we set before. And I think, Tony, you've mentioned that we're getting 85% of our targeted cost savings, which I think is pretty impressive. And you've said you'd like to see that go above 90%, which is kind of very welcome to hear. What I'm noticing on the kind of the budget that we set at the beginning of the year in strategy and resources is that we've got some, I mean, legal and democratic services was set at 17.1 at the beginning of the year, and we're going to have an outcome of a kind of about £1 million higher than that. And finance was set at 12.3 million, and we're going to have an outcome about 800,000 higher than that. So I'm kind of wondering what you're feeling about cost control in those areas, and whether the resources director will make a difference to that, and whether there are other kind of explainers that you would have there. I mean, is that down to agency fees or something like that? So we can kind of really get that focus on making sure that the budget we set is the budget that we deliver.
Thanks, Jerome. I think, without going into too much details, I think there's a general concept, which is that if you are making decisions and those decisions are fully explained and are also done in a way that is open and transparent, you would tend to find that there is then a reduction in legal costs and so on, because people are less inclined to challenge the decision that has been made if they understand why that decision has been made. In some instances, it has sometimes been frustrating, and this is not a political point, but sometimes it is frustrating to be asked to justify things that have been done prior to taking over the council. But then it's also unfair on people who were running the council previously and no longer here to just basically say, well, we're just going to throw them to the wolves because they're no longer our responsibility. That's not the way you act as a reasonable council. So I think what the Executive Director of Resources will do is, by having that immediate oversight over key areas within strategy, much of it is in strategy and resources, I am anticipating us to make much better savings going forward in those areas, but more importantly also delivering a much better service. That isn't meant to be a reflection on assisting staff. It's just simply a recognition of the fact that you have to have the right management structure in order to deliver something as complex as Bristol City Council or any other local authority. And the system we're using, it's not something that we suddenly just thought we'll make up on the spot. It's based on what structures are in place in most of our other comparable local authorities.
Thank you. Councillor Reppington.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do have a question, but just going to make a comment on this first of all. I do find it slightly ironic that, having sat through 4 consecutive budgets where attempts were made to cut the support to the Mayor's office when there was a Mayor, we're now hearing the exact opposite arguments in order to support increasing support, So the one thing I would be interested to know is how much the current support for the committee system is costing compared to the support for the previous mayoral administration, because as you'll all remember, in the referendum one of the big arguments was that it would save us money. So I know that's not a question that Andy's going to be able to answer now, but I would be interested in the answer to that. But my other questions, and unless you were watching on YouTube earlier, Tony, you will have missed that one of the issues we raised is that some of the descriptions to some of these things are so kind of vague that we've had to ask questions that maybe if the descriptions had been slightly better, slightly longer, we would have understood what they were and wouldn't have had to ask the question. So one of the questions on here I've got is about legal services. And there's a £500,000 pressure for legal services, increased pressure on legal services disbursements. I'm just wondering what that £500,000 pressure is about. And the other question I've got is the word Brislington obviously leaps out of the page to me. There's a £240,000 pressure on Brislington and Wellington Road depots. I'm just wondering, is that just a revenue pressure? And if so, what? Or is it actually related to investing in those depots going forwards? Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Andy, I don't know. I mean, in terms of the relative cost or the comparable cost between the leader's office and the mayor's office, I think we can quite happily get those to you, and we'll try to be honest about them, because some things that the mayor's office did we no longer do in the leader's office. I think it's worth saying, by the way, that the leader's office actually consists of just 3 people, not including myself and the deputy leader. So I mean, we are much smaller staffed than previously. But I'll get those numbers to you so you can do a comparison.
I think the whole sort of management structure, including, what was cabinet versus supporting committees, if we could...
Yeah, we could double check. I mean, what I can also say is we have had, obviously we work with our core cities, and our overall management costs are about average for core cities, slightly below average, I think, if I remember rightly. I won't say which city spends the most, because they're already getting enough bad press as it is at the moment, and I don't want to give them a further hard time. In terms of the properties at Wellington Road and Pete, because
thanks, Tony.
This is a slightly embarrassing one, I think.
This is Brislington. It should read Sandy Park. I think Brislington. It should read Sandy Park Depot. So in relation to Sandy Park, yes, and Wellington Road. So it's the cost, it's the operating cost needed to deliver those 2 depots to baseline the budget from when the revenue account took over the management of the asset from the HRA. So the budget wasn't built correctly. So currently there's not enough budget in the revenue to cover the operational delivery of Sandy and Wellington. So it's addressing the budget build of the operational costs for running Wellington and Sandy Park.
So it's just an ongoing revenue cost, and it was previously underestimated in the HRA budget.
Yeah, thanks.
And the other one, the legal costs?
Andy?
Yeah, so this is part of what has been in the past an annual adjustment. So, as a council of our size, at any point in time, we can have a number of different legal cases being supported by our legal team, and some of those cases require external support, but also payments to make settlements. So it's a bit like our insurance provision, our insurance budget as well, where we hold an insurance reserve, where we are self-financing settlement payments on low-value cases. So it is an adjustment in our legal budget based on the amount of legal activity happening where we may need to make payments, and also where there's planning appeals, we incur significant legal costs of planning appeals as well, so it's the budget to finance that.
Can I also sorry, Tim, I mean, this is slightly off on a tangent, but I think it's important to get some idea of where we are. I wasn't able to be at full council yesterday because we had a visit from the select committee for housing and local government, and they wanted to come down to find out how we were delivering housing, but also more importantly, look how we were helping to ensure our housing was being brought up to a safe standard. But one of the things we had a conversation about was that and all of the MPs they came down, I'm really happy to say all have experience in local government, so it was quite nice to be talking to MPs who actually understood what we were talking about. And one of the things that we kind of discussed was the fact is that often, as you become better at delivering some services, you actually almost create work because people become more aware of their ability, that if they put in a complaint about something, it's actually going to get sorted. What I would say in terms of housing in particular, ironically, obviously being given a C3 judgment by the regulator of social housing, I don't think any of us are going to pretend that's a good thing, but that new regulation being brought in, as not just in Bristol but elsewhere, has made more tenants aware of the fact that actually they do have rights, and they can go and ask for a response to that. So I don't know if that's contributing directly to our legal costs, but it is creating some pressures, because we now got people who are prepared to basically step up and say, hang on, I'm not happy with the service I'm getting from the council or from a private landlord than we previously had. So that is both a negative and a positive at the same time, because it means our residents are hopefully starting to get the service that they should have had.
Yeah, thanks. I just wonder, it's something that's one of our councillors raises time and time again, is the amount of appeals that we go through. Appeals, for special educational needs appeals, that the majority of which we lose, and therefore we incur legal costs. Are we, basically the question is, do we incur more legal costs because we're too willing to, we don't get it right first time, and we challenge people when they go on and win the cases in 80% of the time, or whatever it is. So I'm wondering if that is also something that might be adding to this budget that we should be looking at.
Yeah, my understanding is that's pretty common across all local authorities, particularly those who have entered into safety valves or have created deficits. I think as far as special education needs, I think it's a positive announcement by the government that they are now going to look at actually addressing the deficit issue. Obviously, we won't have the full details, and there are still some questions about, from our understanding so far, is that the government will take on the funding of further deficits after 28, 29, I think it is, or 29, 30. So we still need some clarification about what happens about the assistant deficit, because at the moment the assistant deficit we have in, even through it's a ring fence grant with the DSG, the deficit that we have there, it basically has a £2.7 million a year impact on our ability to do things elsewhere. So that's positive, but I think there is an ongoing problem with send appeals and also with the HCPs, and I do think that our children's services team are now starting to turn that corner, and I think you will find some more evidence of that on the web pages tomorrow. I can't say any more than that, but there'll be some more positive news about children's services very soon.
I look forward to that. I suppose the question really is whether it's a false economy challenging some of these if we're just moving the cost onto legal services. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a difficult decision, because the other argument is that if you fail to challenge, then potentially you open yourself up to, if you fail to challenge one for a generic reason, then that essentially means that you're then going to lose everyone after that. And even through, local authorities tend to lose most of them. We don't lose all of them. And also, to be blunt, we may find ourselves, we may find other local authorities will not be very happy for Bristol if we've set a precedent that then puts them into a difficult situation.
On this topic, I do note, of course, we have Councillor Townsend coming here to discuss the CYP portfolio in more detail tomorrow, so it might be good to repeat or hold some of these questions for then as well. Just what she'll have the officers and so on from that area as well. Although I appreciate this is a question about the legal department. I have a question myself actually about this portfolio, specifically about the proposals for some of the AI investment for increasing productivity in the council. As I'm a self-confessed AI skeptic, but I do recognise it does have some good productivity benefits. But I am wondering if any of these proposed savings include cost reductions for support services or personal assistance for colleagues who might have disabilities, or if there's going to be an expectation that support is moved from people onto AI tools to try and support disabled colleagues at all.
Tim B isn't here, otherwise he'd be able to give an answer to this. I don't know if you're able to, Andy, but what I've seen generally at the moment, we are only piloting AI in general, and we're not. Our approach in it would be, and I would say this as somebody who comes from an IT background, is probably small c conservative, in that we are being quite careful about what we do, and we're not just allowing ourselves to rely on AI completely unaided. Andy, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, no, on Councillor McAllister's specific point, I would not expect us in any way to be reducing where we need to have human support to individuals who need support through reasonable adjustments for their work, but also through our use of our systems, we'd be looking to enhance our support we can give to individuals where they need assistive technology as well, to make it easier to access and use our core systems. So that's an absolute priority for the department. This is really about operational efficiency we can create generally through better use of technology, but it's not just technology, it's just looking at the way we do our business. Creating better and more succinct and efficient business processes can create operational efficiencies within the departments that are in the proposals.
Thank you both very much indeed for that. Are there any more questions from members of the committee? Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick comment, because I don't want us to overrun. I see that there's an amount that's been set aside for professional qualification of accountants, and I'm sure that will be money very well spent.
I'm sure it'll be very satisfactory.
Well, I'm not seeing any more hands, so after all that, we might, in fact, be finishing 2 minutes early for today's meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. We will be formally adjourning now on the basis that we will be reconvening for the second part of this meeting at 3 p.m. tomorrow on the 11th of December 2025. Thank you all very much for your contributions, and thank you especially to the officers who facilitated today's meeting, particularly Ian and Andy and those up on the dais. Thank you all very much.